Kyle, I want to get your thoughts first and foremost on the five starters on each respective side. What are your thoughts? Rightfully deserved? Do you feel that somebody should have started over another person, or what's going on here?
I mean, I have both of the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference reserves pulled up. And I mean, I'll tell you this. I mean, just looking at
Oh
the
no, I said
starter,
starters.
I mean,
Just starters.
excuse me, the starters. I meant to say starters. I mean, just looking at the Eastern Conference, you got Kevin Durant, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Bradley Beal, Joel Embiid, and Kyrie Irving. I mean, it's a hell of a starting five. And I for one, don't really have any issues with this starting five. And then just looking at the Western Conference starters, you got LeBron James, Stephen Curry, Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, and Kawhi Leonard. I mean, it's a solid starting five for both conferences. The only one where I can maybe look a different way is maybe Kyrie Irving, just because he hasn't played that much this year. He has had he has had some availability issues through his own personal issues and maybe some of the injuries that he had at the earlier part of the season. But I mean, at this point, you can maybe put James Harden at that five instead of Kyrie Irving. But I mean, you can kind of go back and forth between both of them at this point. You can make a case for either or. But outside of that, I think the starting five for both the Eastern and Western Conference, I think it's fine. I don't really have any I don't have any issues outside. Maybe I'd put James Harden in the starting five compared to Kyrie. That's my only thing.
So I mean, starter wise for me, I think Bradley Beal. Shout out to Bradley Beal because he's been balling out of his mind prior to Washington going on this little win streak that they're on, or should I say, we're on. And I believe it ended last night. Um, Bradley Beal has been playing absolutely out of his flipping mind. I mean, I'm pretty sure he dropped 50 earlier this year, and he dropped like 48 another time separately. Like he's just been like single handedly carrying the Washington Wizards to somewhat relevance. I mean, he's the NBA's league leading scorer with 32.7 points per game, damn near five assists with 4.9 and 5.3 rebounds. So, I mean, he's averaging basically 33, 5, and 5. Absolutely insane because of the lack of talent on that team and Russell Westbrook taking a decent amount of shots away from him as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree completely, other than that, in terms of the accuracy of the starters. The only one in question I do agree with you is the Kyrie Irving. Um, Again, in my opinion, I would probably have Zach LaVine, what he's doing out there in Chicago. Uh, his clutch shots throughout the season, like you said, Kyrie kind of his availability has been in question a little bit, but Zach LaVine has been playing at an all-star caliber level for relatively, I would say, about the last 2 to 3 years, and he's been snubbed for quite some time. There was a point where Zach LaVine was right behind Bradley Beal with just under 30 points a game. He's kind of dwindled down. I think they have him here at 28.6,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know. To me, it doesn't really matter position wise because it's not the All Star game of the old where it's these five start and then it ends up being East versus West. They're doing the draft concept of it
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
So I mean, to me, it's completely irrelevant. But you don't necessarily need to have a true point guard in to start because obviously we know that Giannis isn't a traditional four. We know that Joel Embiid isn't a traditional big. We know that Kyrie Irving isn't necessarily a traditional point guard. So to have Zach LaVine in that lineup, I think that would have made this a little bit more exciting. I'm not saying that Kyrie's handles aren't fun to watch. I'm not saying that he isn't an electrifying player in the league to watch, but I do think that it maybe it was due for another superstar to come out. And Zach LaVine's been showing out all season. To me, I think he deserved to start.
Yeah, I think the only thing that probably detracts from Zach LaVine a little bit is the fact that the Bulls record is what it is. And then
Yeah.
when you look at the Nets are the second best team in the Eastern Conference. They're probably going to overtake the 76ers either before the All-Star break or probably after it, just because I'm going to fully expect that Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving are all going to be playing on. We're going to be on the court at the same time on a consistent basis in the second half of the season. But to focus on some of the other players that I want to give some shine to, one of the surprises, and it's not really a surprise because he's been absolutely sensational so far this year, is Julius Randle. I'm more surprised at the fact that a New York Knick is actually in the All-Star game outside of somebody not named Carmelo Anthony when he was on the Knicks in the beginning part of the 2010s. He's been absolutely sensational. He's averaging 23 points a game, averaging 11 rebounds a game. And not only that, like they have the seventh best record in the Eastern Conference right now. So listen, they're not like a title contending team, because of Julius Randle, but Julius Randle is providing them solid minutes. He's been consistent. He's been great the entire season. And you do have to give a lot of credit to Tom Thibodeau as well for getting that team to where they are. They're not
Big time.
they're not a championship contending team, but look, they're competitive and they could be a playoff team come towards the end of the season. And it's a lot better than where they've always typically been, which is basically at the bottom of the league, not just in the Eastern Conference, but at the bottom of the league. And then probably the other like surprise that I may have here is Chris Paul. I think he simply just got in because of legacy. He's having a solid year with Phoenix, but I've always been of the mindset that Devin Booker has had a more standout year so far than Chris Paul this year. I will say this to kind of defend Chris Paul. He does have a higher PER rating than Devin Booker this year. He also has a higher plus minus than Devin Booker this year. So you do kind of have to factor that in a little bit. But I am kind of glad that that Devin Booker is going to get in, probably because Anthony Davis is not going to be available for the All-Star game as he recovers from his Achilles calf injury, whatever you want to call it at this point. So I am kind of happy that Devin Booker is going to get in when he was originally snubbed of getting into the All-Star game before while they were making these selections for the All-Star game.
Yeah. Since we're transitioning into the reserves, just to give everybody a little bit of a heads up in case they haven't seen it, which I would hope they have by now. On the Eastern Conference side, we have Jaylen Brown, first-time All-Star, James Harden, Zach LaVine, first-time All-Star, Julius Randle, first-time All-Star, Ben Simmons, Jason Tatum, Nikola Vucevic. On the Western Conference, we have Anthony Davis, Paul George, Rudy Gobert, Damian Lillard, Donovan Mitchell, Chris Paul, Zion Williamson, first-time All-Star, and then Devin Booker coming in to replace Anthony Davis. Mm-hmm. If I have to look at somebody I would pull out or somebody that I don't necessarily understand how they're in, Paul George is a name that kind of screams out to me saying, yeah, he's averaging almost 25, 5 and 6, but it's like, have you really done something to kind of stand out and to be an all-star? You know, are you doing something consistently enough? To me, I don't think he is. I think that DeMar DeRozan could have very well been in that conversation. On the Eastern Conference side, I don't know why Ben Simmons is there, averaging 15, 8 and 8. I don't understand why Domantas Sabonis isn't in there. You know, I was criticizing right before the episode Nikola Vucevic, why he was in there. I didn't know the man's numbers were as high as they were. Just looking at his stats this season, he's averaging 24, 11, and 3 on 48% shooting from the field and 39.9% from the three-point line, which is basically 40% for a center.
Balling.
That's absolutely ridiculous, shooting 83.5% from the damn free throw line. As a 5, huge. So I take back everything I said prior. But I mean, just to get back on the Sabonis train, this man was an all-star last season, 6'11", playing the 4 position for the Pacers. Obviously, they are underperforming with the injuries to T.J. Warren, and Chris LeVert in the trade hasn't necessarily even stepped on the court fully for them. Sabonis is averaging 21.5 points, 11.6 rebounds, just a few points shy of 6 assists. He's averaging 5.7. He's shooting 52% from the field, almost 53. And he's shooting almost 36% from the three-point line with a 71 free throw percentage. So he's somebody that I really thought would kind of jump out more than a Ben Simmons. He's someone that has really been trying to carry the Pacers into some kind of relevance without those 2 stars that are missing. So, I mean, you know, just looking at these rosters, like I said, there are some questionable people on this team. We talked about it earlier. I don't know why Rudy Gobert's on the list, but again, there aren't a lot of Western Conference centers that I would necessarily put over him. Like you said, not a legacy pick, but just a consistency pick or just a filler pick to me. So I'm excited to watch the game, but there are some players, as every year, there are players that you kind of just like look at them like, really?
Yeah, I think like some of the players that I have here is like some snubs, and I don't think it's because of their play. I just think it has like something to do with the team's record. I'll give you a couple of examples. So a couple of the snubs that I had here, obviously was DeMar DeRozan. Clearly the leader of the team. He's averaging about 20 points a game. It's been solid for the Spurs this year. And to be quite honest with you, the Spurs are kind of low-key flying in as the 5th seed in the Western Conference right now. So they're only a few games back of the Suns, and the Suns are basically nipping at the Lakers' heels for that third spot in the Western Conference right now. So I would have liked to see maybe DeMar DeRozan get a little bit more attention for the All-Star game, but I think it may have something to do with the fact that the Spurs probably they're the fifth seed right now, but they're not really like what I would consider like a championship contending team. Like if DeMar DeRozan was averaging about 25 points a game, I think that he would definitely get some higher looks. Other than that, I've got Mike Conley Jr. as another snub here as well. I think people will kind of always not disrespect him. But he's one of the best two-way players in the game. He's averaging about 16 points a game this year so far. He's been a major piece for Utah being in the position that they are as the number one team, not only in the Western Conference, but in the entire league as well. So maybe I would have liked to see him get a little bit more shine for the effort that he's put out on the court this year. De'Aaron Fox has been absolutely sensational this year. It's just that he's on the Kings.
It's on the Kings.
The Kings have the fourth worst record in the Western Conference. But look, De'Aaron Fox is averaging 24 points a game. He's averaging 9 assists as well. He's had some amazing plays this year. He had one amazing dunk that he had probably like a month ago. And the only other person that I have here as a snub, and I think it really has to do with the team's record, not because of their individual play, is Bam Adebayo. He's having a solid year. He's averaging 19 points a game, 9 rebounds a game, and also 5 assists to go along with it too. And as a stretch forward or the 5 on the team, like that's pretty solid. But the Heat are 14 and 17. Injuries have really plagued the Heat this year so far. They have kind of made a turn to look like a semi-decent team in the Eastern Conference. I still expect the Heat to be a playoff team this year. And Bam is going to be a big reason why that they'll get to the playoffs later this year.
The Heat will find a way to bounce back. Jimmy's getting in a groove. Bam will be fine. Once Tyler Hero gets back in his groove as well, and the injuries start to kind of recover along with everything else, they'll be fine.